Hey everyone, my name is Danielle Perry and I am the host of Breakthrough Conversations, and this is a podcast where I bring people on and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge or situation in their lives. So again, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in today, and this episode is special to me because it features my very own First Lady / Pastor, Pastor Kimberlie Richardson. And today she's actually going to share about her journey from being unsaved to becoming a First Lady / Pastor. So I hope you're ready to tune in. I know that this episode is going to bless you, and this is only part 1 of episode 11. So without further ado, here it is, y'all. Be blessed. Mrs. Kimberlie Richardson, or I should say, because that didn't even feel right, Pastor Kimberlie Richardson. Hi.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you're on. It definitely means a lot. I had Pastor Lawrence on maybe about a month ago. So now I have you on, and I'm just humbled to have you on.
Thank you.
So thank you for being a part. And today we're going to talk about your journey from being unsaved to becoming a First Lady / Pastor.
Okay.
All right. So I feel like it's really loaded. And I know you won't be able to share everything, which is fine, but to share a bit of your story, I know that it will definitely encourage people who are watching.
Okay.
So I want you to start off by just introducing yourself.
Eyes burning. Okay, so my eyes are burning, so I'm not crying.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why my eyes are burning. Hi, everybody. So I'm excited to be here today. And so who am I? I am the proud daughter of the late Dr. David Cozart and Gloria Carter Cozart. What was life like for me growing up? I grew up with one sibling, David Cozart, who is my dude. That's like my best friend. I grew up in Spring Valley, New York, a small town outside of New York City. Close enough to get in when you want to go do some stuff, and far enough to get out. And so life was really great. My parents always made me feel loved and supported. Whatever I did, they always pushed me to do more. Rules and expectations that were clear. And if you did not abide by them, then the consequences were clear as well.
Okay.
But they always gave me something to push towards. So it wasn't like you can never do, you can never be. It's how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it and how can we help you. So life was great. Really family oriented. My mother's from 13.
Woo.
My father's from 11 or 12.
Wow.
And so
big family.
A big family, always around family, which was great. Growing up in New York, my father's family was right there. So my siblings, my cousins grew up more like siblings. We were together all the time. We would cry to go to my grandmother's house. I attended a little church named St. Charles Amy Zion Church in Piermont, New York, and that was a family church. My forefathers helped build the church.
Okay.
Walked around a big old creek to go to my family. Almost everybody on the block was family. So we were always together. So we were a very close-knit, well, we are a very close-knit family. God-fearing, God first. That was the key thing. You're going to go to church, and you're going to go to Sunday school, and you're going to go to Bible study. And so God was really a key factor in our lives.
Okay.
So growing up was good.
Okay.
It was good.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. So you said that you grew up in church. Now, how was life like for you as a teenager? Were you abiding by the things that you learned in church, or were you kind of in and out? How was that?
I was a typical teenager. Rough around the edges. I dealt a lot with peer pressure.
Okay.
So growing up, I lived on a different side of town than a lot of my friends. So I had a lot of peer pressure. So I had to be louder or bigger and badder than everybody else. And inside, I really wasn't that big and bad at all, right? But I felt like I had to prove myself a lot. Prove that I was black enough, that I am a young black woman growing up, even though I don't live in that part of town. So it was kind of rough. Peer pressure was rough. Had a lot of great friends though, but peer pressure was rough. Relationships, you know how that can get, with guys, and dealt with all of that. Just dealing with the typical teenage stuff: bullying, peer pressure. Trying to fit in. My self-esteem was really low. And it was funny because when I was that young, full lips were not the style. right? You know, years later became the style, right? So I would smile, hold it in my lips. So every picture looked so different, right? It was ridiculous. But just not really sure of who I was, trying to find my way. And along that journey, had some bumps, some bruises, but it's worked for my good. Like the word says, all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord, that are the called according to his purpose. And so, church, it was more ritualistic. You know, when we went to church, you know, you open up hymn 25, what a friend we have in Jesus, and everything was really by the book. Yeah. So I didn't really, I knew who Jesus was. And I think Jesus kept me from going, different places, or not going but so far. But as far as like different principles and stuff like that, no, I didn't really live by that at that time. Okay.
Now you said that you would go to a different part of town to hang out with your friends. So what was that like? Because you lived in another part, but you would go to a different part to hang out.
How was that? Fun, exciting, naughty, adventurous. It was great. I mean, that's where, you know, that's when you want to party, that's where you went. I knew what friend's house to go to spend the night, so I can go to whatever party I want to go to the night before, the next day. Just you know, they didn't have the rules that I had. Like, I'm the only one that had to be home by a certain time over the summer. And every time I had to be home, they said, oh, you just missed. I'm like, I kept missing everything. Everything happens once I leave, right? But I still had this curfew. I had to do my chores before I left in the summer. I had a curfew to be back home. And nobody else did. And I didn't understand that. Right. Why do I have to be home by a certain time? And so I had my fun, you know, that I had to get right back home because my parents weren't playing that. Right. So, but it was good. I had some lifelong friends.
Okay. So you're in high school, or I should say senior year, and you're looking at colleges, or whatever time frame you were looking at colleges, and you choose Morgan State. So what inspired that decision? Because now you're going out of state, hours away. So what inspired that decision?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. Okay. So my guidance counselor in high school, I remember meeting with him 2 times. I can't really tell you what he looked like. I can't really tell you what the office looked like. But I can tell you some things that he said to me. So I told him that I found out that I could graduate early. So I graduated early from high school. So I graduated in January, and I attended a community college from university. I was still able to be the cheerleading captain and do all my stuff at the school, but I took my classes at Rockland Community College. But as he was signing my paper to release me from school, I think back now on what happened. So I was like an AP English class, and I was the only black in there. I didn't want to be in there. And so I felt uncomfortable. And so instead of them saying, you need to stay, they're like, okay, you can just come on out. You know, I'll just transfer to another class. Or math is not my thing, right? I didn't want to take any more math classes. We don't have to worry about taking it. So I'm thinking they're doing me a favor. But that's because they didn't think that I was going to go anywhere other than high school. And so when I talked to my counselor my second time about going to college, he laughed at me. Like, he cracked up laughing. Oh, wow. And he was like, he looked at me, he said, you're not college material. Ooh. And he said, maybe the military will take you. Wow. And I was like, what? Wow. You know, so now you sign my paper, I'm going to community college. I mean, he laughed hysterically, like, are you for real? He's like, you're not college material. Maybe the military would take you. Wow. And so if it wasn't for the parents that I had, right, I don't know where I would be. Yeah. And the sad thing about that is how many other people did he say that to? Yeah. And they never left my little town in Spring Valley. So I applied to schools late. I've never gone on a college tour. He didn't tell me about SATs because I wasn't college material. Wow. So my mother found an SAT kind of like a tutoring session. So I only had one more SAT I can take that would give me the results back in time for me to send out for college. So I applied to college just late. Okay. And the day before I was sat to take my SAT, I totaled my mother's car. So I was devastated. I had a lot going on, and then I had to get up that next morning and take the SAT, knowing that if I didn't do well on that one, I don't have another chance. Right, right. So I applied. I went through all that. Applied to schools. I got accepted to Hampton, but I couldn't start until the spring because they were. I guess they had the admissions requirements were already met. I wanted to go to Howard. My father said you'll never get there on time because they didn't have any dorms. Went to Florida A&M University to visit my friend, it's going to sound so shallow, that's where I was. So I didn't know that it rained all the time.
Okay.
First of all, I saw too many cows. It's in Tallahassee, Florida. I saw too many cows, but it rained, and I didn't have a perm. And so I was like, it rains too much. It's too many cows. I ain't have a perm. I'm not going all the way out here. And I didn't have any family out in Florida at that time. So, okay, that's out. That's, it rains too much. I didn't have a perm. What am I going to do? Not having it. So that's the shallow existence I had at that time. So I was working at a hospital called Helen Hayes Hospital in the dietary department. And one of the guys working there, I met, and he went to Morgan State University.
Okay.
And that's how I found out about Morgan. He said, you should come, you should try it. It's not too far from home. And so I went home and I applied.
Okay.
And I ended up at Morgan State.
Okay. Okay. So talk about Morgan State.
Woo!
What was college
Morgan
like
State
for you?
Was a phenomenal experience, and then also a challenging experience. I'll talk about the phenomenal experience first. Gosh, so the friends that I met at Morgan State University my freshman year in O'Connell Hall, which was a female dorm then, are still my best friends to the day. Oh my gosh. And so so I've met lifelong friends. Everybody who knows me, I'm Morgan Bear all the way. So I'm diehard Morgan. Don't miss homecomings. If I do, I'm upset, you know. Prepare months ahead of time for homecomings. And so I went to go try out to be on the cheerleading squad. And but the day of tryouts, my cousin said, hey, we're going to Virginia Beach, you want to come? I was like, yeah. So I never tried out. And I love to dance. And so I became a member of the marching band, the Mighty Marching Machine, and I was a foxy dancer. And so very active. I was in the New York Club. I was Miss Junior, which was exciting for me. I was Miss Black and Gold, which was in the sweetheart of the Alphas. So those were exciting moments for me. So I was in everything. Whatever you can think of, I was doing. I pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority while I was there. And Morgan was just a phenomenal experience. The teachers were more like family. I remember going to Dr. McKinney. Was a wonderful, wonderful person. She's left us now, but I remember going to her home. She brought the whole class to her home for an end of the year picnic. You know, who does that? So I felt like I was a part of a family. Teachers brought us in. You can really be yourself and tell them what's going on with you, and you learned about who you were and who you could possibly be. And if they saw you kind of deviating from that, they would pull that coattail and bring you back in. So people really loved and cared about you at Morgan. So Morgan was great. It wasn't too far from home, so I can get back to New York to take all my dirty laundry. Have my mama wash it.
How far was that drive?
4 hours, 3.5
hours.
Yep, packing up in the car. Let's go. But I would, I can go home and still come back. My family came here to visit me all the time. Friends were here all the time. So Morgan was a great experience. I learned. I was a psychology major, and I learned how to really appreciate Morgan's education when I left to go to Towson State for grad school. What they were teaching me in graduate school at Towson State, I learned my junior year at Morgan. So the education was awesome. The family, the friendships that still last now, was great. But I had some rocky times. Trying to find myself, trying to figure out where I fit in, who I am. And I remember just too trusting, really naive, and so dealing with some serious stuff. Like one incident was, so back then Greek picnics were like the huge, really huge events, and there was one in Virginia Beach, and there was one in Philly, and so this came back from the one in Philly, and there's this guy on campus that everybody thought was like one of the finest guys on campus, right? And but one of my friends liked him, so he was off limits. But he was a friend. But so I never thought about him any other kind of way, because if one of my friends says he's cute, then he's off limits for everybody. And that's how we always did things. And so, but he was just a friend, so we were all hanging out one day at his house and going through pictures, looking at pictures from the Greek picnic and seeing that he had friends that I grew up with in New York in his pictures, and just kind of just reminiscing, having a good time. And while I was talking, and again, there was no type of intimacy at all, 'cause that's not how we were. And I remember being thrown on my back And I didn't know what was going on. And so he tried to rape me twice in the same night.
Wow. And
this brother got up, put a condom on, and came back. Can you believe it? It was, and so it was a really hard place to sit in. Like, what did think? What did you do wrong? What could you have done differently? Maybe if you didn't wear this outfit, and back then it was flare pants. They had a big old flare pants on, and so it wasn't nothing short and skimpy. Maybe if you didn't wear this perfume. They lived in a townhouse, so other people were in the house, so I wasn't in there by myself. Okay. But why didn't you scream louder, or why didn't you scream at all? You know, so you start to blame yourself a lot, and so that was really, really hard. Yeah. I wanted to talk about it, but he was one of the most popular guys on campus. Right, why would he have to take anything? You know, I'm sure that was not an issue for him. And so I remember when he drove me back home. He said, you know, he kept apologizing, and of course I'm not mad, just get me back home. And he brought me back home, and I remember sitting in the shower crying, and some of my friends, we all lived in the same home together, and I told them what happened, and of course everybody was devastated. We were upset, but let me tell you what they did, and they still, if I bring it up today, they still kind of protect me. And I remember, so I saw him on campus one time the next day, and he ran up to me. I'm sorry, you forgive me, can we start over? So no, I'm frantic right now because I'm really scared, I'm nervous. And so if they would see him coming, my friends would block me, like they would block him from my view. And I remember being at the little theater at Morgan that they had, it's called that at that time, and he walked in with some of his fraternity brothers, and when they saw him, I saw my friends, they kept moving. They were sitting in the seats, and they kept moving up. And why do they keep moving like that? They were taking turns blocking him from my view. It's like, wow, you know. They knew that when I saw him, I would freak. I would just freeze, and that's how much they really made sure that I was okay. And so, so that was a pretty rough experience, because he would still try to speak. I guess he wanted to make sure I wasn't going to tell. You know, he would still try to speak. Years later, when I saw him, I think he was ashamed, because he would kind of try to duck me out. One time I was sitting in a barber shop with my sons, and he walked in, and he saw me. Years later, like over 20-something decades later, and I'm sitting in a barber shop, and he walked in. He looked at me and took his baseball cap and kind of put it over his head, like pushed down his eyes and sat back. And I called my friend. I was like, Lynn, guess who's here? She said, I'm on my way, I'm coming right now. I said, no, I'm good. No, I'm coming right now. I'm like, okay, no, I'm good. Because you know what? By this time I'm saved. And, you know, I really want to go to him and say, it's okay. And I want to pray for him. Right. You know, because God enabled me to be able to kind of forgive him and learn and take it as a lesson to learn something from, and how God protected me even in that, and a story to tell other young women about how to be careful, how to be mindful, what not to do, how, you know, you can't go by how somebody looks to determine what kind of character they have. And so I use it as a story to kind of help prevent some other young people from going through what I went through. So other than that kind of foolishness and the boyfriend drama with them cheating on you, doing all that kind of crazy stuff, right? With girls who weren't even that cute. Like, pick somebody who's cuter than me, you know. So anyway, other than that, Morgan was a phenomenal experience, and I push Morgan to everybody. If you want to go to school, that's the place to be.
That's the place to be. That's the place to be. I mean, I might say otherwise, but we're not going to.
That's okay. We can make it into that.
So that experience that you explained that you had with that guy, what year of college was that for you?
Either my sophomore, I think of my sophomore year.
Sophomore year. Okay. So what was the turning point? Because I think you rededicated your life to Christ. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at some point in your college undergrad, you rededicated your life to Christ.
I did.
So what year was that, and what was that like for you?
It's funny you said rededicated. So I got saved twice. I think I was in 6th grade and some other grade. And when I got saved in 6th grade, my aunt went to a holiness church, and so he didn't wear a skirt. He didn't wear pants. So I tried to put a skirt on and run around the field, you know, play kickball at school. That didn't work, so that salvation didn't last too long. But it was my junior year at Morgan. which was wonderful. So I went to summer school, took chemistry class or something that summer, and I met some guys who were a part of actually the founding fathers of Alpha Nu Omega fraternity and sorority. And we were just friends in class, and they kept talking to me about, one in particular, talking about Christ. I'm talking about, I went to this Greek picnic and I did this, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, but Christ." And you know, because I had that foundation, I would listen, but I didn't really take it anywhere. And then one day he invited me to church. It's like a little storefront church on Garrison Boulevard, and the pastor, they were all members, students at Morgan State. And so I went to church that first night, and it was funny. I put on the best thing that I could put on, and you know, I clubbed a party, so it was the best thing for me, but it might not have been the best thing, right? So, but I went with one of my friends. I convinced them to go with me, her to go with me, and so I went to church, and it was a great experience. It was wonderful. Again, the pastor was my peer. The people there all went to Morgan with me, so I felt really comfortable and at home. And just hearing the word again, the way he preached it was just great. And but then they said, if you want to join church, you got to come back for the afternoon service. So my friend was like, "Well, I'm not doing all that." So she's after me. And so I went back, and they called everybody to the front row. And then they're like, "Who wants to give their life to Christ?" So I was just like, because I can come for all that, you know. And they were like, again, it's a storefront church. Everybody knows each other. They're like, "Kim." I was like, "What? I didn't come for all that. I had to ask for, I didn't come for all that. I came to join church. I didn't come for all that." So they kept talking. People get up and gave their life to Christ. I was like, "Oh, that's nice," you know. You know. And then his name is Don Edwards. He called me up. He said, "Can I talk to you just for a minute?" So I walked up. He kept talking and kept talking. I said, "Fine. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say just to shut you up? What do you want me to say?"
This is during the service?
This is how, I'm in the front. "What do you want this to shut you up? What do you want me to say?" Lift my, fine. And when I lifted my hands and he led me to salvation, tears just began to stream down my face. And my heart like just became really soft and pliable to the words, and immediately I began to speak in tongues. I didn't know what that was.
Wow. I
grew up in an Amy Zion church. You know, back then we didn't speak in tongues. So I went from having an attitude, I got saved like, "Fine, what do you want me to say just to shut you up?" to hands raised, tears flowing, and speaking in tongues.
Wow.
And then the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a powerful experience.
Yeah.
So now that you have had that experience, what was the rest of your college life like? Did you still have the same friends? Were you still going to parties every now and then? Like, you know, what was that like now?
I would love to say that I immediately just jump right into Christ and do anything else, but that would not be true. So I would kind of shadow the fence. So back then in Baltimore, the big club was Odell's on North Avenue, and it was a McDonald's on North Avenue, and everybody hung in the parking lot in McDonald's. So instead of going inside the club, I would hang in the parking lot. So I was close enough to be in the club, but not in the club. You know, hanging in McDonald's. McDonald's was still fun. Everybody was sitting outside. You know, so I would do stuff like that. I would kind of go, but not be there. Like, still be in the area. I remember I wanted to go to this club in D.C. really badly. My friends never wanted to go. But all of a sudden, when I got saved, everybody wanted to go.
Of course.
And I said, "Well, I don't want to go." "Oh, you're a party pooper." I said, whatever, you know. So, but did they ever leave me? No, because my friends ended up getting saved too, which is not immediately, but we ended up getting saved. Everybody, a lot of us all ended up getting saved. But that transition was still, you know, I was still trying to figure out what that looked like, and how to shift that my mindset. So I would go to parties, but I wouldn't party. Like I might go and still kind of be there, but my desire began to change. And what made it easier is I lived off campus, so I wasn't like right in the midst of everything. So it made it a lot easier. So I still was trying to figure out what that looks like for me. And so a lot of that changed when I left that church dismantled, and then I ended up at following my friend Shantae, the Kingdom Worship Center, and that's,
Okay.
after that, life just was never the same.
Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that. When you would go home, did your parents notice any change in you?
Oh, absolutely. So, I would drive home to New York, but I would rush back Sunday morning. I would go right into church. And like, what in the world? You know, usually I came home as late as I could possibly stay before I would catch the bus so I can sleep. Because I wasn't the best distance driver, even though 4 hours not really a big distance. It was a lot for me.
Yeah. So
I would catch the bus in and out. But when I got saved and started going to church, I had to be back by Sunday morning. So I started driving back and forth, and they were like, what in the world? Like, is this a cult? Like, what are you doing? What's happening? You know? So my personality didn't change that much. I was always kind of the same, but I wasn't doing some of the things I was doing. Some of my friends were like, you know, I wouldn't party with them anymore. Or I didn't want to go there anymore. So, but it wasn't too much of an issue. It was just my parents going, okay, what's going on with you?
Commute.
Yeah, you're going back and forth. You know, you're talking different. And I was sitting, I became really, I saw Christ differently. Because so I would sit in church and I would get an attitude like, he didn't open doors to church. You know, he didn't ask me if they want to get saved. He didn't, like, I was now critiquing everything and comparing it to what I was used to in Baltimore.
Right.
And so that caused some rifts a little bit, like, you know. But then when I would go back, singing hymn number 45, what a friend we have in Jesus, meant something to me now. Like, now my hands are raised and the tears are falling. Now I understand what the anointing is. I remember years before, I was really young, and this woman came from Mississippi. Her name was Shirley Jackson. Her last name, her name was Rosie Jackson. And when she would sing, I felt something, and I didn't know what that was. When she would preach, I would feel something. I didn't know what that was. And I was like, why is she crying? You know, and I realized then that, looking back, that was the anointing that I felt that was resting on her life. So when I went back, my posture in church was different. I didn't mind raising my hands. I didn't mind standing. When I sang that song, it meant something to me. But then again, I was kind of still scrutinizing everything. Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? So of course, a little bit of rift, and then my parents said, I'm coming to see Richard coming. When you coming back and forth, I'm coming to check this church out. Okay. And he was Pastor Ralph Dennis then, and when they got there, they were like, okay, I see why you're the way that you are. And they loved him. And my father ended up getting saved at the church we were on Ashland Avenue. My father walked up and gave his life to Christ. That made it a good experience. So it really wasn't, the big thing is, why are you moving different? They wanted me to love God. And I tell people all the time, my parents blessed me with a lot of wonderful things. But the greatest gift that they gave me was the gift and the knowledge of Jesus Christ. So they were excited to see that. They thought I became kind of fanatical. They wanted to see what was really going on. So going back and forth, the transition wasn't too bad. They just had a lot of questions.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. That kind of happened to me at some point in my life, so I understand. So at Kingdom Worship Center, as you know, we're going back and forth and commuting. At what point did you become involved in ministry there?
I mean, as far as being a minister, or just being a part of ministry in general?
I think you were ordained there, right?
I was. I thought you meant just ministry, because I sang on the choir and I can't sing. We all know that. I sang on the choir and I sang so bad that when I was the only one there from my section, they didn't even go over the section. But I was always on time. I was there. I was faithful. Could not sing a lick. And so I danced. We had in the liturgical dance ministry. I had Joshua Generation. I had a step team of the young kids there. So I was involved in ministry. How I become a licensed minister. One Sunday, our church was located on Ashland Avenue then. That's in East Baltimore. And Bishop Dennis stood up and he said, I want to see so-and-so, so-and-so, so. This kind of called off a list of everybody's names. And I need y'all to be here this week. I forgot what day he said, and walked off. And we were like, got scared. What do we do? What's wrong? You know, something. Did I do something? I'm trying to think back. Did I do something? Did I say something? So we all came back that day because nobody knew what was going on, and it was quiet. Like, everybody kind of sat there like, why are we here? What's wrong? What's wrong? And he started talking about what he saw in our lives. And he talked about each and every one of us. This is what I see in you, and so I'm noticing you, and I've noticed your growth. And like he would say something like every now and then, like during church or Bible study, you know, and that's when he talked about wanting us to be a part of the MIT Ministers in Training class, which was the first one I think they had at Kingdom Worship Center, which was called Bethel Holy Tabernacle back then. Yes, it was called Bethel Holy Tabernacle back then. So that's how I never even thought about ministry. I never thought about that at all until that conversation came in, and then started having ministers training.
Now, how old were you at that point?
Let me see. My early 20s.
Early 20s. Okay. All right. So, so you're serving in church. I'm kind of giggling because I'm looking at the questions that I have for you. But you're serving in church, and there's this gentleman that I guess eventually began attending the church at some point, and he began to take notice of you. Now, were you interested in this gentleman initially?
Talking about my husband? No. So, and it had nothing to do with him personally. So I found that every time I try to get to a certain, or strive to get to a certain level in God, a distraction will always come in. And the distraction was always a male coming in my life. And so I was determined, I can't get distracted, you know. And so he was very quiet. You know, by this time, that's my church family, right? And everybody from Morgan went there anyway. So Bishop graduated from Morgan's, a whole Morgan church. And by that time, all my friends are saved. Okay. So we're all attending church together. And so I was determined that I wasn't going to be distracted.
Yeah.
And I would get upset because I would hear people say, guys would say to me, God told me that you're going to be my wife. And I'm like, yeah, no, he didn't. Yeah. You know, he could not have possibly told you that about me. He didn't tell me that, you know. So I got tired of kind of hearing that. Just coming off of an engagement, because I was engaged to be married to a great guy. It's a wonderful guy. God just said no. And that was 5 years. I didn't date anybody for 5 years. Well, I dated somebody 5 years after I caught my engagement off. I dated one person for a short period of time before I dated Lawrence Richardson. And I didn't. I thought he was going to be a distraction. Yeah. So I didn't really pay much attention to him. There's a dear woman at the church, Mary Thomas. She was a mother at the church, and I called her G-Ma. That was like that was my grandmother. And she would always say, did you see Cutie Pie today? No one makes all them faces. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? You know, we sat on two different sides of the church. He called my side the broke side, whatever. But we sat on different sides of the church. So I didn't really, he was quiet. So his friend was a lot more outspoken. So we focused more on him. Lawrence kind of sat back. He didn't really say much at all.
Right.
So I didn't really pay much attention to him. And then one day, we was having a shut-in. People don't even know what that is anymore, but we were having a shut-in. And you didn't bring pillows and blankets, right? You came to have church, and felt bad if you dozed off. So, but we were having a shut-in, and he wasn't staying. And he said to me, he said, well, can you pray for me? And I was like, okay, sure. Well, actually, prior to that, he would like say little stuff to me. And like I remember one time we were in the North X, and somebody was bothered him. He said, can you come get them? They bothered me. I was like, why would I do that? Like, I was like, no. I was like, what? No, And one time he had a piece of paper out, and then he said, because we didn't have cell phones back then, he was like, can I get your number? I was like, no. Like, why would I give you my number? I was like, no. Aww. So again, it wasn't him personally. I was just so determined to stay on track. Fast forwarding to when we had this shut-in, he asked me to pray for him. And I said, okay. And it was funny, the night before that, we were at one of my friend's house. And I said, I'm so tired of guys not knowing what they want. Because I had a timeline. I was going to be married by a certain time. I was going to do,
Yeah.
And then I said, I want somebody who would say, this is what I want. You know what they want. Let's put all the cards on the table. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want. And so the next day, shut in, and he asked me to pray for him. I said, sure. I took that very seriously. When people say pray for you, pray for me, so I pray for him. And God dealt with me a lot in writing. So I would write a lot of stuff. And I remember we were sitting in the shut-in, And I began to pray for him. And God said to me, soar with the eagles. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Okay, well, I'm going high. I'm trying to go higher in the Lord. I'm going higher in the Lord. It's working. Right now, I'm soaring with the eagles and all this stuff. And then God brought him before me. And God gives us God gives us choices and options, right? And he said that, you know, he can be your husband. And I was like, you just told me to soar with the eagles. I'm a soar. I'm ready to soar. I don't want all that, because again, it's brought too much distraction. And I was determined that I need to be what God wanted me to be, and I need to give all of my attention to that. And relationships are too complicated, you know. So I kept hearing soar with the eagle, soar with the eagle, and I kept hearing that, you know, he can be your husband, or he's your husband, one of those two. And so that Saturday, because that was a Friday night going into that Saturday, I was planning on having a fashion show for Women's Day at the church. So we had practice at the church, and they had elders meeting. And he was there for the elders meeting. And he said to me, so did the Lord say anything to you while you prayed for me? And I was like, no. I was like, no. Like, why are you asking me that? I'm like, ugh. I was like, no. He was like, oh, okay. And so, but this time when I saw him differently. Like, I saw him. And I was going, So he was out in the hall talking to a young lady who was a part of the practice that I was having. And I went to go get her. I said, come on, we're getting ready to start. And he was like, are you sure the Lord didn't say anything to you? I was like, yeah. He said for me to soar with the eagles. And he said, started chuckling. I was like, why are you laughing? On his charm, he had an eagle, and he did like this. I was like, he's not talking about you. He's not talking about that. You know, my mouth. He's not talking about that. But on the inside, I'm going, oh my God. Right. So when he came in after his eldership training was over. He came into the sanctuary and sat down, was like writing something down. And so I found myself like showing the moves, but on the side where he was, like now I wanted him to see me, you know, before I didn't even pay attention. So now I'm noticing him. And so he's writing, and then at the end he comes and gives me some notes. I think I thought he's going to critique my maybe next time I try this. What you know about modeling? I was like, what? So I was like, brother, please, right? So but then on the instant I'm going,
Right.
And I don't remember if it was that particular day or another day. I don't remember which day. He asked me out to lunch. He said, can I take you out to lunch? And so my friends are like, you know, show me license plate number, you know, where you going? You know, we were just really accountable to one another. And so we went to Fridays, and he just laid it out. He was just like, now mind you, we didn't talk a lot on the phone.
Right.
It was like laid out where he was going, who he was, his past. This is where this is who I am, so this is where I'm going. And I was like, oh my God, like that was a whole lot. That's too much. Like,
right.
And where you from? Like, we didn't even get
First
to like
date.
where you from. Like, you know, like what? And then God brought me back to what I asked him now 2 days or whatever, a couple of days before. I wanted him to be straight with me, what he wanted, so I can determine immediately if I wanted to waste my time, or if it would be a waste of time, or if it would be, you know, something I should consider. And so it didn't scare me away. I thought it would. It didn't scare me away. Then we talked a lot more, and he was so like. He would talk so low, and I'm loud. I'm like, what you say? You know, he was just trying to be. Now he's just louder, if not louder, right? But he was just like really suave. But the good thing about it was that you saw God all over him. Like he really loved the Lord, you know. And so, yeah. So that's
I love it.
That's how I met Lawrence Richardson.
I love it. So, you decide to court. You both decide to be in a relationship. How long did you guys date before you married?
A year.
So he laid it out for you. On that date, did he let you know where he was going as far as pastoralship and all?
So when Lawrence became a part of Kingdom Worship Center, Lawrence started pastoring like in his teenage years or early 20s. So he was under the Kingdom Covenant, which was a fellowship. So he had his living waters. He already had a sign. He had they had banners in the church. So he came into Kingdom with a ministry already. So I already knew that he was a pastor.
Okay.
He just didn't have a congregation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I already knew we were going to go in that direction.
Okay. So I asked that because I remember in a conversation I've had with you before, you never imagined yourself marrying a pastor.
It's going to be nice and saved. Don't have to be a deacon and just go to church with me. Be nice and saved.
Right, right. So shortly after you are married, you both start a church, right?
Absolutely.
So just talk about just now where you are, I guess, mentally, spiritually, because again, you said you would never imagined yourself marrying a pastor, but now you're here and you start a church shortly after you're married. So just what is going on in your mind at that point? Wow. Well, did you enjoy part 1 of this episode? Well, if you did, I want you to go ahead and tune back in next Thursday, August 25th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to see part 2. And again, it's featured on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So I hope that you were blessed. I hope that you laughed a bit. And be sure to come back next week for the rest of this episode. Until then, everyone, be blessed.